So today I am delighted to be joined by Jerry Bostick. Jerry was one of a handful of people to have worked in mission control during the Mercury, Gemini and Apollo eras. Jerry Bostick worked his way up to the position of Chief of the Flight Dynamics branch during the Apollo program. So I'm delighted to be joined by you today, Jerry.
Happy to be here.
So I was just wondering if I could start. So to begin, could you maybe kind of cover how you became involved, or actually what your initial interest was in aviation and how you got involved with NASA?
Well, actually, when I was in elementary school and high school, I had very little interest in aviation. Of course, when Sputnik went up, I became interested in space flight, but I didn't have any idea that I would ever be involved. I like to build things. I helped my dad dig the foundation trenches for our house. Loved doing that. We dug a cellar under the house. Loved doing that. I built a patio on the back of our house by myself when I was 14 years old. I like to work with my hands and do things. So I got a degree from Mississippi State University in civil engineering, specializing in structures. And I went to work for NASA at the Langley Research Center in the Structures Research Division. And I thought, boy, this is it, you know. It's NASA, but it's doing what I want. I can build things, build structures. Well, I found out very quickly that I didn't like research. It was too vague for me. I was assigned a project, and I kept asking questions about, well, who needs this, and what's going to happen at the end of the one-year project. And I didn't like the answer. The answer was, well, after a year, you write a report, and if people are interested, or all of the people who are interested will give you a call, and you could possibly even end up developing, you know, what you had started in your project. And I said, what if nobody calls? I said, well, then we assign you another project. So I found out that on the other side of Langley Field, they had this manned space flight group that was doing manned space flight, and they were moving to Houston, and both of those were attractive to me. So I went over and signed up.
So what was the network like of having the back staff, the flight dynamics, all the controllers around you? What is there any reflections you have on the team in general, like with the likes of Christopher Kraft behind you and Glyn Lunny? What was the dynamic like between you all?
Well, it was one word sums it all up: teamwork. It was teamwork like I had never seen before and haven't seen since. It was teamwork among the flight controllers, teamwork between the flight controllers and the astronauts, between astronauts, flight controllers, and the mission planners, and teamwork with the simulation people. Even though the simulation people were always trying to come up with stuff to trick us, we respected what they were doing because they made us think, they made us reevaluate our mission rules, and it was, even though we would fuss at them for giving us so many problems, it actually was a good training exercise because usually, with the exception of Apollo 13, I guess, the missions were much easier than the simulations.
Can you talk a little about your experience from the liftoff to the landing and to the re-entry of the Apollo 11 that were in 1969? So can you talk about the experience of that time?
Well, we had, at that time, we had been to the moon already on Apollo 8 and 10. 10 was really a dress rehearsal for the landing, but we knew that this was not a simulation or a dress rehearsal. It was the real thing. So we were very dedicated and determined, like we always were for any mission, but there was a special sense of determination for Apollo 11 because we thought, okay, this is what we've all been working for. It's what the president asked us to do. And so let's go do it. And it was we were happy to have Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Mike Collins, but especially happy to have Armstrong as the commander of the lunar module because he obviously was a great test pilot. He had proved how cool he was on Gemini 8, and it was just a good feeling among all the flight controllers. That
I know there was a tradition because I know you were part of Mission Control, the Unsung Heroes. That it was a tradition that you brought in of having American flags to celebrate. Well, not celebrate because I know you guys were all very focused that you wouldn't celebrate until the mission was down and basically on safe levels. So how did you bring the flags in? So how did you do that?
Well, even though we didn't sit around and talk about it a lot, we all knew what was required to get to the moon and to meet the president's goal. And we knew that the Russians were ahead of us. They had obviously done the first satellite, the first man in space, the first woman in space, the first extravehicular activity. They were just a little bit ahead of us in everything. But on Gemini 76, we rendezvoused. We weren't able to dock, but we rendezvoused, and that was at first. We had finally beaten the Russians or something. And before we did that, I had asked the flight director, Chris Kraut, said, this is the first time that we're actually going to beat the Russians at something. So without any excessive celebration, hooping and hollering and all of that, but would you mind if I just got some small American flags, handed them out, and once we achieved the rendezvous, everybody can just silently wave them and put them on the console. And he said, I think that's a wonderful idea. So I had my secretary to get them. Actually, she got them at a funeral home.
Oh.
It was little flags that they used on the cars in military funerals. And got 50 of those, and it was a proud day to be an American.
Yeah, I bet it was. Talking quite quickly, the public would see space flight to the moon becoming routine. So just like a lot of people thought the space shuttle became quite routine of going there. But then with Apollo 13, it brought back media attention, the public's attention, for unfortunate reasons, but it was a success in that you brought the men home and you got them home, the entire mission control team and people behind that and the backroom staff. So can you share some of your thoughts about that mission and the events that happened and how your involvement happened in that?
Well, a lot of people now refer to Apollo 13 as a successful failure. And since I have an aversion to the word failure, I prefer to say that it was a very demanding mission with a very successful outcome. Several miracles that saved that flight. The first miracle was that it happened at exactly the right time. If it had happened any earlier, we wouldn't have had enough consumables in the lunar module. The crew had, the three astronauts had gotten into the lunar module. That, any earlier, at that time the lunar module was designed to hold two people for 2 days, and here we want to ask it to support 3 people for 4 days. And if it happened any earlier, that wouldn't have been possible. And if it had happened any later, they would have already been in the lunar module, and obviously that would have been a catastrophic situation. And other miracles have happened. We between the time when the accident occurred and we had to get them back to a free return trajectory, we had to make some modifications in the control center to the software that would allow us to directly target a spot on the Earth to come back to. We could iterate maneuvers and, we could guess at the velocity required and the time to do it and see where it landed and iterate that. But IBM, who was the software contractor in the real-time computer complex, came in and modified the software so that we could do that we could target that burn and come up with a much better solution more quickly. And
so I know after that, in 1997, you would be the technical advisor for the film Apollo 13 with Ron Howard. So how was the approach made to you to be work as a technical advisor, and how accurate is the film to the truth of what you experienced?
Well, at the time, my son Michael worked for Ron Howard. He was the head of Ron's Imagine Entertainment Film Division. They had a film division and a television division. And my son called me one day and he said, Jim Lovell is writing a book about Apollo 13. And I said, yeah, with a co-writer named Jeffrey Fligler. And I'm going to recommend to Ron that we buy the rights and make a movie out of it. And I said, a documentary? And he said, no, a live action movie, general interest movie. And I said, please don't do that. You'll screw it up, he said, why do you think we'll screw it up? I said, well, everybody that's attempted so far screwed up. I walked out of the movie Maroon, which was supposedly based on Apollo 13, and it was hard. I went to the premiere in Pasadena, Texas, near Houston, and we rode over there on a bus from the Johnson Space Center to this theater in Pasadena where they showed it. And I sat between Gene Kranz and Fred Hayes. And I was sweating BBs the whole time. I thought they're both going to hate me. At that time, I worked for Fred at Grumman. He was my boss. He had hired me in Grumman. And I thought, oh my God, he's going to fire me. This is terrible. They didn't say anything at the end. We got back on the bus, and Fred and his wife sat behind me and my wife. And as soon as he sat down, I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I thought, okay, here he comes. And he said, I didn't chew gum. That was his only comment to me about the movie. He loved it. He thought it was great.
Yeah.
But he didn't chew gum.
Yeah, because I'd read somewhere that it was because Bill Paxton liked to chew gum. Oh
yeah. Paxton was a great guy. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore.
I conclude with the final question. With the Dragon rocket that is now the substitute to the space shuttle, how do you think that is really helping get people back into space? And do you think it's now heading to more that NASA and companies are now becoming more privatized, and that's a better route into space and heading back to the moon? Or do you think it needs to be government?
Well, like I said, I welcome all participants, and I do think I think SpaceX is doing wonderful work. There are other companies that are also, they aren't as visible right now, but they will be soon, I think. And I welcome their participation. I think it's going to, if nothing else, is going to help underwrite the costs. I think that they're bringing an attitude back to the space program very similar to what we had back in the 60s. And that's very encouraging to see.